let's start with a quick recap of the last fight night. Overall, we only predicted 50% of the fights correctly. Despite this, we were able to cash on 2 substantial underdogs. Fortunately, this led to a winning week, netting us around 2.8 units of profit. We are currently riding a 5-week win streak, and Dana better give us that title shot soon. Anyway, let's have a look at who the prediction model thinks is likely to win at UFC 310. Starting off the night, Kennedy Nzechukwu will be making a 42-day turnaround on short notice to face Lukasz Brzeski at heavyweight. This will be Kennedy's second fight since moving up. In his first outing, he earned a first-round TKO over Chris Barnett, who injured himself from jumping during his introduction. Before this, Kennedy was 6-5 as a light heavyweight, losing his last 2 fights in the division. Lukasz is coming in with a 1-4 record in the UFC and has failed a drug test after his Contender Series win. How does this guy still have a contract? He will be slightly shorter and is giving up nearly 5 inches in reach. At our book, Kennedy is a -600 favorite, and the model likes him as well, just much less. Kennedy is the obvious pick here in my opinion, but we have only seen him against a compromised heavyweight so far. Next up at lightweight will be Clay Guida versus Chase Hooper. These two have faced off before, with Chase securing a first-round calf slicer in Fury Pro Grappling just 2 years ago. Since then, Clay has suffered 2 unanimous decision losses in the UFC before taking a year off. Chase has racked up 3 more wins in that same time, finishing 2 of those by submission. Hooper is taller, longer, and 13 years younger. The books have him as a massive -1,000 favorite, and the model is very strong at -252. Our money goes where the model tells us, but it's hard to count out a veteran like Guida. He still puts on an incredible pace with a unique style and is by far the most experienced opponent Hooper has ever faced. Moving up to welterweight, where Michael Chiesa fights Max Griffin. Chiesa has gone 2-3 in his last 5. He lost 3 consecutive bouts before securing a win in his last fight. Unfortunately, that win was against Tony Ferguson, so it doesn't mean much these days. Max is 3-2 in his last 5, with all of those going to the judges. The bookmakers have Griffin as a small -139 favorite, while the model sees it flipped with Chiesa at -132. I expect this to be a close fight, with Michael having the advantage on the ground. Griffin has never been subbed, but I'm hoping for the first this weekend. In our next fight, Cody Durden takes on Joshua Van at flyweight. Cody is coming off a win over Matt Schnell. He took the fight on a 1 week's notice and was able to end his 2-fight skid. He has a record of 6-4 in the UFC and has been finished in every loss. Joshua is 4-1 in the UFC, with 3 of those wins accounting for every decision on his record. He will be the younger fighter by 10 years, but is giving up a couple of inches in both height and reach. The book gives Van the edge at -145, and the model is a bit more confident at -160. Joshua does have an 83% takedown defense rate in the UFC, and I expect that he'll need that to hold up to secure a win this weekend. At a catch weight of 195 pounds, we have the rescheduled bout between Chris Weidman and Eryk Anders. Eryk pulled out of this fight 2 weeks ago when he came down with food poisoning at the last minute. Chris has a record of 2-2 since returning to middleweight. In 2015, he was an undefeated middleweight champion. Since then, he has a record of 3-7, being finished in 6 of those 7 losses. Eryk has a UFC record of 8-8 with 1 no contest. His stats look impressive, with 10 of his 16 wins coming inside the distance, but he has only stopped a single opponent in the last 5 years. This fight is a pick'em at the books, and again, the model sees Chris as the smallest of favorites. I'm still hoping that Weidman is able to wrestle effectively and avoid getting punched in the face. I'd happily take a GSP-style win over a KO loss. Our second of 4 welterweight bouts sees Randy Brown fighting Bryan Battle. Randy is currently riding a 3-fight win streak and has won 4 of his last 5 bouts. He has seen plenty of finishes in his career, but has been to a decision in 5 of his last 6 wins. Bryan hasn't seen that many decisions in his entire career, finishing 5 of his 6 UFC wins. These guys have very similar stats across the board, with Randy edging out most of the grappling, and Bryan most of the striking. The books have battle with a small -175 edge, and the model is much more confident at -224. Randy has been stopped in all but one of his pro losses, and I'm hoping to see one more KO added to the list. The first featherweight fight of the night will be Movsar Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling. This fight was originally scheduled for October, but Alja was forced to pull out with a minor injury. Movsar is still undefeated at 18-0. Unfortunately, he is a decision machine without a single finish in 8 UFC outings. Sterling recently made the move to featherweight and has earned his first victory in the division. His title loss to O'Malley ended a 9-fight win streak that spanned 6 years. At our book, Evloev is a -260 favorite, while the model sees it closer to even at -119. Aljo is often looked at as a wrestler, but only has a 27% takedown accuracy in the UFC. His defense is slightly better, but at only 45%, I'd expect Evloev to have a clean path to victory. Vicente Luque will be taking on Themba Gorimbo in our next welterweight bout. Luque has only won 2 of his last 5 fights, with those 5 dating back to 2021. He has had a hard time getting fights lately, with 3 of his opponents pulling out in the last year. This will be his 3rd time in a row with a gap of more than 200 days between fights. Themba is riding a 4-fight win streak since losing his UFC debut. He has been incredibly active, with this being his 4th fight in 2024. He will carry a small height and reach advantage, but that likely won't matter once he starts to grapple. At the books, Themba is a -170 favorite, but the model sees the odds flipped with Luque at -147. I disagree with the model here and expect Gorimbo to wrestle his way to victory. Despite that, we put our money on Luque, just like the model tells us to. Our final fight on the prelims is Anthony Smith versus Dominick Reyes in the only light heavyweight match on the card. Anthony is one of the most experienced fighters on the roster with 57 pro fights, 23 of those coming in the UFC. He isn't much better than a 50-50 fighter in the promotion, but has finished 85% of his UFC wins. Reyes was undefeated in 2020 when he beat John Jones for the light heavyweight belt. Unfortunately, terrible judging was the beginning of a 4-fight skid, including 3 KO losses. Dominick was scheduled for a couple of canceled bouts that saw him away from the octagon for nearly 2 years. And in June, he returned with a first-round win over Dustin Jacoby. The bookmakers expect that Reyes has gotten his career back on track, favoring him at -330. The model has the fight much closer at -125. I'm not sure that Dom's chin will ever recover, but Anthony hasn't scored a KO, TKO since 2018, so I'm holding out hope. Kicking off the main card at featherweight will be Nate Landwehr versus Doo Ho Choi. Nate is 4-1 in his last 5 with a bonus on all 4 wins. Choi also puts on great fights with 5 bonuses in 8 UFC bouts. He had lost 3 in a row before leaving for mandatory military service. Since returning in 2023, he has fought to a majority draw and earned a second-round KO in his last fight. Our book was offering Nate at -145, but the model sees value in Choi, favoring him at -138. This should be a damn good fight, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it end in a KO for either guy. We've got one more featherweight bout, this one between Bryce Mitchell and Kron Gracie. Bryce has taken his only 2 professional losses in his last 3 fights. He was finished in both of those outings, one by submission and one by KO. He has a very respected submission game, but has only been able to earn 1 finish in 7 UFC wins. Kron is still very green with only 7 MMA fights. He's on a 2-fight losing streak with only 1 win in the octagon. It's been a year and a half since his last bout, and he had been away for more than 3 years before that. At the books, Bryce is a very large -600 favorite, and the model is on the same side at -138. I'd like to see Bryce keep this fight on the feet where he should have a clear advantage. I just hope he isn't letting his dreams of rapping get in the way of his training. Our feature bout takes place at heavyweight, where Ciryl Gane will rematch Alexander Volkov. In their first bout, which took place in 2021, Gane was able to secure a unanimous decision victory. Since then, he has gone 3-2, winning a completely unnecessary interim title. It has been well over a year since Gane's last fight, which he won by second round TKO. Volkov has been slightly more active since their first bout, taking 6 fights and winning 5 of them. He is currently riding a 4-fight win streak. The rematch was originally booked for UFC 308, but Volkov pulled out due to a knee injury. Our bookmakers are showing Gane as a minus 340 favorite, while the model has this as a pick'em with a less than 1% edge towards Volkov. My personal pick would lean towards Gane, but I'm not mad at plus 280 value on Volkov. The last of our welterweight bouts takes place in the co-main event between Shavkat Rakhmonov and Ian Garry. We've got 2 undefeated fighters, Shavkat with 18 wins and Ian with 15. They have 6 and 8 fights in the UFC respectively. Shavkat has never been to a decision and has earned 3 bonuses in just 6 promotional fights. Ian, on the other hand, has seen 5 decisions in his 8 UFC bouts. The bookies have Shavkat as a minus 350 favorite, and for some reason, the model likes Ian Garry at minus 121. I'm not a fan of this play at all. I think that Rakhmonov's grappling will be more than enough to overwhelm Ian. Fortunately, if it goes to the judges, we can be sure of a 30-27 sweep for Ian. Finally, our main event is a flyweight title fight between Alexander Pantoja and the UFC newcomer Kai Asakura. Pantoja is currently riding a 6-fight win streak that includes every potential title contender. He's got 3 title fights under his belt, all of which have gone to the judges. Kai was offered a rare opportunity to fight for a title in his UFC debut. He's coming in from Ryzen, where he won the bantamweight title twice without a single defense. He has won 4 of his last 5 fights, ending the last 2 with knees to the body. At the books, Pantoja is a moderate minus 270 favorite. The model suggests that Asakura has an edge here, favoring him at minus 120. Kai is the taller and longer fighter. He will likely be bigger as well, having not made the cut to 125 pounds since 2017. I'd suggest waiting until we see Kai on the scale before blindly following the model like we do. As always, we followed all of the model predictions and placed our bets. We are still using a 1+ strategy, which has us placing 1 unit on all underdogs and enough to return 1 unit on all favorites. Much like last week, the model is pretty heavy on the underdogs, only agreeing with the bookies on 7 of the 14 fights. The pick'em between Weidman and Anders falls under the favorites in this case. With 3 sizable favorites, including Hooper at minus 1,000, our risk is very high at 38.2 units. A perfect night is incredibly unlikely with so many underdogs. But if it were to happen, we would profit 19.84 units for a nearly 52% return on investment. All in all, I'm just hoping to dodge an upset in the first 2 fights. Then we should only need to cash a couple of small favorites to be profitable. That's all we've got for you this week. As always, thank you for watching and good luck on all of your bets this weekend.